So, still in Hyde Park. This is a chap who I've met a few times down here, known only to me as my friend. He is probably the freest man I think that I know, and has the balls to actually live his life pretty much entirely independently of the machine. Anyway, the reason I've got him on camera here is that he talked to me a few weeks ago about an alternative city design. Venus Project is something that you will see frequently on my channel, but this is a similar kind of philosophy but an entirely different design idea, based on a pyramidal shape and using hemp both as a purifier of air and water and as a building material. Anyway, so I'll pass over to my friend here who will tell you more about it.
It seems that we've got a slight problem with our carbon footprint. We've been digging up fossil fuels for a long period of time, recombining them with the atmosphere. The amount of millions of tons of carbon that we've introduced to our atmosphere is starting to weigh on us, and we're likely to go into runaway climate change in the near future. As far as I'm aware, the only viable solution is to fix the carbon into a form that's beneficial to all of life. The best way, apparently, as far as I'm aware, of fixing that much carbon as quickly as we need to fix it is to grow lots and lots of hemp. Hemp produces a seed which will give us oil and protein, and it produces resins in its stalks and fibres. Whilst it's growing, it sheds its leaves onto the ground, which fertilise the soil, and the roots in the soil will bond the soil together. So when we harvest it, we can leave the roots in the ground, and they will rot down in their own time. We take the stalks and strip them apart for fibres and resins. The bast, the pithy material in the middle, we can put back to compost. By growing enough hemp, we need to grow millions of tons of hemp in order to redress our carbon footprint. We need to do it as soon as we possibly can. Ideally, we need to get to a state where we become aware of the fact that this planet that we live on isn't ours, and living on it is the wrong kind of relationship. We need to learn to live with life instead of on it, or with the planet instead of on it. And in order to do that, we need to find a way of living where we're not claiming ownership over the entire planet. So basically we need to give it back. So we need to give back the surface of the planet to the natural world in order to have a future. This limits us with the idea that if we give back the entirety of the natural world to nature, we'd have no space for ourselves to live. So it runs into the problem of generating space for ourselves. I'm proposing that we build huge terraced pyramids, 2 miles square at their base and 1 mile tall, made out of a combination of hemp and volcanic ash. It's an old form of concrete that the Romans used to use, and apparently in France there are old Roman bridges, or no longer bridges, but the foundations of old Roman bridges that have got modern bridges built on top of the Roman foundations and have juggernauts going over the top. It's a hemp-based concrete. We have the ability to produce it. We don't have the willpower to produce it. We have the ability to grow enough hemp all over the world in order to reverse our climate problems, but we don't have the will to do it. At the moment we are divided by all sorts of structures, such as money, which causes complete inequality, and nation, which allows us to fear the other to such a degree that we're willing to make guns, bombs, tanks, and all sorts of things that are detrimental to all of life.
Tell us more about the design of the pyramid city.
The basic design is, as I say, a pyramid, but terraced from bottom to top. Each upright surface is the front of houses, and each flat surface is gardens. Each set of gardens overhangs the last uprights, the fronts of houses, by about 10 feet. The idea is that with a 4 square mile, or 2 miles by 2 miles at its base, the structures, which is 4 square miles of land, we can generate 5 square miles of gardens on our rooftops, have 60,000 homes on the outside or facing out into the open countryside, and inside each structure generate 110 square miles of space with an average ceiling height of 36 feet. Each of the house units would be a 36-foot cube internally. The whole of the 2 mile square is divided into 40-foot cubes on the outside, which allows for walls being 4 foot thick between each dwelling space. The reason for 4 foot thick walls is that you have insulation from sound, so it doesn't matter what your neighbour's doing, you'll never hear it, and also for the infrastructure of the building. Each house unit, being a 36-foot cube, would have its infrastructure on its floor, its ceiling, and on the 3 internal walls. The external wall would be passive solar glass, so the light that comes into our house will light our house, but at the same time it will generate energy. Inside the structure, on the normal ground, we suffer from the heaving and shifting of the ground. It moves all over the place. Any infrastructure we put on the ground is liable to get damaged by the way that the ground moves. Inside a structure that I'm proposing, because it's a man-made structure and we can make it so that it is stable, digging down to healthy foundations, only building them in places that are suitable, we'll be able to have I don't know what the right word is. If every footstep we take uses our body weight to pump water up in the structure, then everywhere we go we'll be generating energy. If we can recycle our every out-breath, so our moisture-rich, carbon dioxide-rich warm air that we breathe out can travel up in the airflows of the structure to the top. At a mile high we'd have a condensing cone that would take out the moisture and drop the cold air straight back down the centre of the structure, turning turbines on its way to the fires of industry. Now the fires of industry will take out any pathogens in the air as we recycle it. It will also increase the amount of carbon in the air that we are recycling. The fires of industry can be run on our waste materials, so any green waste or any, pardon the expression, shit that we produce, where we produce it, on whichever floor of the structure we're on, it has potential kinetic energy that can be reabsorbed by the structure on its way between us depositing it and it reaching processing. We process it for methane and alcohol, which give us the fuels for the fires of industry. Inside the structures, we generate our own light. If you control the light and the temperature, you control the season. So in our farms inside the structure, we'll be able to have every season of the year, every month of the year. We'll be able to have everything that grows everywhere in the world locally produced and in constant fruition. As somebody once said, man spends most of his time trying to get from A to B. Wouldn't it be a much more sensible thing to make A the place to be? So how can we live in a sustainable environment? And this is what I'm talking about, is a way of supporting all of life. So man has claimed this world as his. We've said this is my planet, whereas it belongs to all of life equally. So for man to take it and act in the detriment of all of life is negating from our own future. To poison the rain, to poison the air, to poison the sea, to poison the land, doesn't actually bode for a decent future at all. So at some point I've got to take responsibility for my actions. Apparently, when man grows up, he's supposed to become independent, self-reliant and responsible. Well, at the moment I depend on the natural world, I rely on the natural world, and I'm responsible for damaging it and pretty much destroying it with my every action. I need to change that in order to grow up. So to become independent and self-reliant, I need to be able to produce my own air. So recycle air. I know that plant life, when it's in daylight, will take carbon dioxide out of the air and replace it with oxygen. So if all my farms inside the structure are given a carbon dioxide rich air, they will process plenty of carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen for the housing part of our structure, for the living part of our structure. If all of our entertainment, recreation, if all of our needs are actually dealt with within these structures, then we get rid of drought, famine and flood from the natural world. Well, we're no longer reliant on the natural world, we become independent of it, and therefore natural fluctuations in the weather, in the climate, won't affect us. So we won't need to go to war because we're lacking in this or lacking in that. What we'll have a situation where everybody's got everything. But if we go down the lines of ownership, like we go at the moment, and we try to control each other with it, and own it, and buy it, and sell it, then we'll end up in the same problem. We'll end up with an inequality that will lead to problems. You've got a harvest spider on your arm. So most of our problems that we're causing at the moment are through inequality. We have a hierarchical system that basically there's a bunch of control freaks, which us humans seem to be a bunch of control freaks, but we don't admit the fact that we're control freaks, and we inflict our control upon everything else. And at some point we've got to separate ourselves from everything else and find our own way of living, so that man's world and the natural world can become two separate places that live in harmony side by side. Once living in these structures, there's no problem with going out into the countryside, go for a walk, go and enjoy it. But we shouldn't be taking life from it. If in our structures we've got aquariums, saltwater and freshwater, we don't need to fish in the sea anymore. We'll produce our own fish. So we can clean the seas up, detoxify them, learn the skill set that is needed to clean up the planet and to clean up our environmental mess, build the tool set that is needed to clean it up, and find that way of living in harmony with each other. If we're all on the same side, working towards the same goal, and we don't have hierarchy, then that would be the equivalent of everybody earning the same money. If we're all earning the same money, then we can do away with money completely, because if everybody's got the same, does it matter? If we're living for the love of life and we're caring about everybody else more than our individual selves, we will all be looked after by everybody else, and we will all look after everybody else. If we care about the planet in the same way, by looking after the planet, by making it as healthy and vital and viable as possible, it makes our lives as healthy, vital and viable as possible. So back to these structures. Nobody will live at the top, nobody will live at the bottom, and nobody lives on the corners. The corners of the structure, all the way from the top to the bottom, or bottom to the top, hold vertical wind turbines. Vertical wind turbines can be put in cages so birds can't fly into them, so they won't be harmful to avian life. By situating them on the corners of the building will act like a sail, and the air will travel faster around the corners than it does in normal straight air. So we'll generate energy through that. So we've got footsteps, out breath, vertical wind turbines on the corners, and passive solar on all of the glass, all of the frontage of the building. Plus recycling of our out breath. Now, all of these things should give us plenty of energy to do pretty much whatever we want, within reason. But at the moment where we're living, we create sterile environments in which we sleep. We connect them together with sterile environments such as roads, and in order to get from one sterile environment to another sterile environment, we're using vast amounts of fossil fuels in order to sterilise the air and the land. So at some point we've got to wake up to our habits at present, become very uncomfortable with them, and start working towards making a change. Hemp seems to have the answers to most of it. A bunch of people that smoke a lot of pot aren't going to go to war. But you don't have to smoke pot. You know, it's not about having lots of pot to smoke, even though some of us like to smoke pot. It's about
the ability to fix large amounts of carbon very quickly, right?
Yeah.
And then being able to use that as a construction material afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of drilling a hole and expending vast amounts of energy pumping carbon down a hole in order to fix the carbon by putting it into the ground.
And actually the growing of hemp revitalises the soil at the same time, right?
Yeah.
As well as purifying the air, it revitalises the soil and provides you with a consequence-free building material, right?
Yeah, you can go up to a piece of land that's got very little fertility and grow hemp on it, and by the end of your growing hemp on it, it'll have a lot more fertility and vitality in the soil. So yeah, it generates a healthier planet. The illegality of hemp was based on the paper industry and landowners.
Film Reefer Madness, absolutely right.
Landowners owning vast amounts of forestry and not having a way of making an income from it, even though it was inferior products. So they came up with inferior paper, made hemp illegal, because paper used to be made from hemp, clothes used to be made from hemp. The British Empire was built on hemp, without the rigging for the ships, without the sails, without the ropes. This country would have never been able to get to where it got to. So at some point hemp built the British Empire, but at some point the British turned its back on hemp and made it illegal. But that illegality has led to all sorts of crimes, and it would be a really good idea if we got rid of the crimes. I'm afraid I'm a believer in the fact that 13 pence worth of heroin in Afghanistan should cost 13 pence in London, not 300 quid. And it's that inequality, that black marketing, the profit making that causes the problems that we've got as far as drug related crimes go. If you could walk into Sainsbury's and buy your day's fix for 13p, who would care if you're a junkie? What effect would you have on anybody else? You would affect yourself. You wouldn't go around stealing for it. You wouldn't need to. So a lot of the time our legalities, our laws, actually stop us from doing anything that's sensible and vital. As far as I can see, growing vast quantities of hemp is the only way we're going to have a future, and we're going to have to start really soon. Every front garden, every back garden, every bit of public ground, every space that's not at present utilised by nature itself, because we'll leave the woodlands, we'll leave the natural land as much as we can, leave natural, but that which we're taking up for our entertainment and recreation, kicking a bladder full of air around a field or something like that, turn it to hemp for a few years. If in 5 years, or if in 4 years ideally, we can grow, let's say 50 million tonnes of hemp, or hemp fibre, we'll have taken 50 million tonnes of carbon from the atmosphere and started to reverse our carbon footprint, our carbon problems. If we don't, over the near future, within our lifetimes, climate will reach, well, it will be runaway climate change. We'll reach the point where the methane beds and everything else will brew up and we won't have a future at all. So the choice is, do we want a future that has no money, no hierarchy, where so long as you're not acting in a manner that's detrimental to anybody else or anything else, you can do pretty much whatever you want, where the average working week is about 2 or 3 hours rather than any more, and where, as a for instance, you want to go on holiday to a foreign country and going by wind power is going to take you a month to get there. What would it matter if it takes you a month? At the moment, we're in a rush. You've got to get there and back because you've got to be at work, because you've got to work the 40 or 60 hours doing whatever you're doing to the detriment of the world in order to be able to have a recreational time, a recreation, in order to rebuild yourself to the point where you can sustain or survive another period of time where you're doing something that was recklessly horrible to the natural environment. To me, it doesn't make sense. We're living in a world that is so screwed up that unless we wake up to it and we start to get uncomfortable with it, we're going to destroy the future of everything we say we love. And to me, that's a problem. There's a guy called Darwin and a guy called Rumbold, yeah? And a guy called Rumbold came up with this wonderful idea of cooperative interdependence. Now, cooperative interdependence means that my out-breath feeds the trees, their out-breath feeds me. Yeah, we've got this relationship. So I've got a relationship with the trees. The water that's in my blood is the same as the water in the rain cycle. I've got a relationship. I've got a relationship with the whole of the planet that I live on. The food that I eat is the mineral kingdom, is the land that it grows on. If I toxify and poison the whole of the planet for a short-term gain, I'm toxifying and poisoning myself. If I poison the rain, I'm poisoning the water I drink. If I poison the air that I breathe, I'm poisoning all of it. So, how is it that my short-term financial gain can be worth throwing away my long-term environmental future?
What?
Look at Rumbold. Look at the fact that we're actually together. We are all, as you say, we're all one. At the moment, we're a parasitic organism that's devoiding its host planet of its ability to support life. We need to become a symbiotic life form that's supporting the life of its host planet. This is a mental health problem that we're in denial of.
People are self-centered.
The money stuff, because the money stuff we brought in so that we could have a standing army. Before we did that, the people that would be in the army would be the same people that grow the crops, that do all the other work in society. So when the two armies met, more often than not, they would send forward a champion from each side. The two people would have a fight. The decision
they can't afford to lose manpower.
The decision would be made by those two people fighting, and the two armies would go back to whatever it was they were doing before. Right. When we invented money, we had the ability to have an expendable force. A group of people that were there purely and simply to take life. And then the army that could just take life, and it didn't matter how many you lose because you could just buy some more, could go up against the group that had to feed themselves, had to hunt, had to gather, had to do all the other bits. So the side that had the big army that had nothing else to do could kill all of the others, take over their space and enslave the people.
And that's who now runs the world. The people that had the big armies, that's who now runs the world.
Divide and conquer.
You are talking like you want us to delete our emotions, like greedy, like jealous. Like
No,
impossible because
Not impossible.
Don't get rid of greed. Just instead of focusing your greed to in here, I'm greedy for little me. Transfer our greed to out there. I'm greedy to give. I'm greedy to care. I'm greedy to sort this problem out. It's not greed, it's where it's placed.
You turn it inside out, you know, and greed
Placed.
now becomes
It's in our stomach.
giving. You know
We
what
need
I
to
mean?
lift it to our heart and give, instead of being greedy to take. That's all
It's
it
actually
is.
the same thing, you just do it the other
After we did hunter-gathering, and once we'd broken up into tribes that were fighting each other, we did the bartering thing to be able to trade with other tribes.
Which obviously caused more problems.
Well,
there's
again, it was
negativity in that.
taking something that wasn't ours,
Yeah.
claiming it as ours, and using it to manipulate the minds of others.
Okay, but obviously.
But your 13 pence worth of heroin that you'd buy from somebody in Afghanistan, by the time it gets to this country, is worth 300 quid. So, if it was completely legal and transported but wholesale by government or whatever, then for 13 pence you could walk into your shop and you buy your heroin fix. Hey man, if you got into a really bad habit, it might cost you 26 pence. Yeah? Instead of 300 quid, 600 quid, 900 quid. Yeah? So people that are spending a vast amount on drugs in the illegal black market are generating a system where criminality has to occur. Because there's no way anybody can afford those prices. So we have an awful lot of crime that's related to something which, if it was perfectly legal and it was only illegal to profit on it, yeah? If you're going to sell alcohol and sell tobacco, you should sell drugs at the same time.
The first step.
Yeah?
And
But you
then,
shouldn't be allowed to profit
when
on them.
people can
And
decide.
so by not profiting on them, we can actually wipe out the black market and reduce the crime.
Liberate Mankind is my YouTube
So
because of the debt and the interest,
it's something to
you would
consider
probably
that our legal
have
system
problems to motivate
helps
yourself because you
support
have
a
to do all
system
the other stuff. You
that
have
helps
to
fund
work
the
to
debt.
get again, go to
It's
buy
kind of a
food
bit
and stuff
scary.
like that. But if you
At
can
the moment
actually start thinking about what you really
Like
want.
I say, we're scared
And then when
of the unknown.
when money
We're
doesn't
comfortable
really
with what we know. So all of history we know.
I think most people would agree with it, right?
We know history. We don't know the future. So we educate our children to make our history for us.
Correct.
Because we're comfortable with
I
that.
love that. I'm going to
As
steal
long
that
as
phrase.
our children will make a history for us, we can step into our history. So we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again because we want to repeat the comfortable place to be in. We don't want to step into the future. If we change the way that we live, because at the moment we claim the ownership over this whole planet, say it's ours, if we can learn to give the planet back to all of life, say it was never ours in the first place, we made a terrible mistake a long time ago, and since then we've been, as it were, living in sin, because we've been taking something that wasn't ours and using it to the detriment of all of life. If we can